So right now I'm going to talk about solid principles for Swift and software development. Before we go any further, I've yet to find anything online that really discusses solid principles or anything on YouTube that discusses solid principles as as it refers to Swift developers and iOS mobile developers. There's always this general, they give you a general definition, but hopefully this introduction will lead to me giving more in-depth explanations about how you can apply these solid principles to your iOS mobile development. So solid principles are a set of guidelines that software engineers can use to write better and more maintainable code. These principles were created to help developers build code that is easier to understand, test, and modify. So let's talk about a brief history. This picture on the side is Robert C. Martin, otherwise known as Uncle Bob. Solid principles are a set of guidelines that software developers can use to write better and more maintainable code. These principles were introduced by Robert C. Martin in his 2000 paper titled Design Principles and Design Patterns. Martin, also known as Uncle Bob, is a well-known engineer and author who has contributed a lot to the field of software development. He developed the solid principles as a way to help developers write better code that is easier to understand, test, and modify. Over time, the solid principles have become widely accepted and used in the software development industry. They have been incorporated into various software development methodologies that have helped improve the quality of software code. Today, many developers and development teams continue to use these principles as a guide for writing high-quality, maintainable code. So what does SOLID stand for? SOLID is an acronym that stands for Solid Responsibility or Single Responsibility Principle, Open Close Principle, Liskov Substitution Principle, Interface Segregation Principle, Dependency Inversion Principle. Take a closer look at the solid principles. Single responsibility. This principle states the class should have only one reason to change. In other words, the class should have only one job or responsibility. To open close principle. This principle states that software entities such as classes, modules, etc., should be open for extension but closed for modification. This means you should be able to add new functionality to a class or a module without changing the existing code. This is called substitution principle. This principle states that you should be able to use a subclass in place of its parent class without affecting the correctness of the program. In other words, a subclass should be able to be substituted for its parent class without any problems. Okay. Interface segregation principle. This principle states that a client should not be forced to depend on methods it does not use. In other words, you should not split up large interfaces into smaller, more specific ones that are tailored to each client's needs. Okay. Dependency inversion principle. This principle states that high-level modules should not depend on low-level modules. Instead, they should depend on abstractions. Abstractions should not depend on details. Details should depend on abstractions. And why are solid principles important? By following the principles, developers can write code that is more flexible, maintainable, and scalable. It can also make it easier for developers to work collaboratively on code bases, as code is easier to understand and modify.